Ladies and gentlemen, and CvCISO listeners around the globe, welcome to the CvCISO podcast. This is episode 63. We have our esteemed guests, Evan, Francine, the Great, Dave Tuckman, and Jordan Darling. And I'm your host, Andy Covert. We're a little rowdy today, but we'll be discussing the Salt Typhoon hacking group. And it's come out recently that the FBI 2 days ago said that they've hacked at least 200 U.S. companies very recently. And we'll be getting into that and a whole lot more. So take it away, Evan.
Put your seatbelt on and you're up.
Yeah, right at you. All right.
First of all, why Salt Typhoon? Why are they called Salt Typhoon?
Why do we give the names that we give
Great
to
question.
all these damn attacker groups? It's crazy. Because not only has it been Salt Typhoon, they used to be, well, there was a time when they were called Earth Estries, Earth and then Estries, ESTRIES. They've also been called Ghost Emperor, Famous Sparrow, and UNC 2286.
Why didn't UNC 2286 stick?
Well,
I
why
like
not
Salt
famous?
Typhoon better.
Why not Famous Sparrow? That's like,
That's cool.
that is cool. Or Ghost Emperor.
Did
I mean, who's going to
they
give you
change
any
their
crap?
name or did we change it?
We did.
Great
Who's
question.
gonna? We did that. Who's going to give you any crap though? Like when your CEO is like, "What happened?" And you're like, "It was Ghost Emperor." You're like, "Oh, enough said."
Right. Yeah,
Well,
that sounds dangerous.
Over here, we're kind of powered by AI. So I asked Copilot, and it is saying that the Typhoon part references Chinese origin and Salt references this particular attack.
I think
So-
we should give them like humiliating names, poopy pants or something like that.
Yeah.
PPNs.
Poopy Pants Typhoon.
We got
It's a
we got
shitstorm.
hacked, but that doesn't have quite the same effect when you go in front of the board and said we were attacked by poopy pants.
That puts more light back on us.
Yeah,
You got hacked by who?
Yeah,
Right.
we were vulnerable to what? Let's dive into this.
Poopy pants just did a data dump.
Yeah, Chinese poopy pants.
well, Salt Typhoon's been around for a while. I mean, they're most recently in the news because the original attack that kind of hit some of the big telcos. They kind of came out a little bit last year. Now you continue to learn more and more and more, and it's over 200 companies. And these are large companies. These are telecommunications companies. These are government entities. These are organizations as you would have expected to have much better security. And I know that this game isn't about risk elimination. No matter what you do, no matter how tight your configurations are, no matter how well you patch things, no matter what, bad things are going to happen, right? The name of the game isn't risk elimination, but it's risk management. And part of being, I think, managing risk is understanding your risk. It's paying attention to what's going on. So the fact that these guys, some of these attacks, they were embedded.
For
Salt
years.
Typhoon, for 5-6 years.
Yeah.
Gee.
And these are large telecommunications companies and government entities that have multi-million-dollar information security budgets, and you can't identify. And we'll get into kind of the TTPs. Those are tactics, techniques, and procedures about how these attacks take place. But it's frustrating. It's really frustrating to know that the shittiness in our industry is as widespread as it is. You know what I mean? If it was just like one company, you'd be like, all right, smack them on the head and let's move on. But this is widespread. And you get a lot of excuses because I think in this industry, we're really good at excuses. We're really good at it's a nation state. It's super sophisticated. It's an advanced, persistent threat. Bullshit. Yes, it's more advanced. There are some techniques there that I think are a little bit novel, but it's the same TCP/IP that we all use. It's the same configurations, that we're all supposed to be using. Patch management is patch management.
Mhm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Configuring a network securely with proper segmentation, these are basic fundamental things that had they been in place in these large organizations, it would have been stopped or at least detected early on.
So if these large organizations, they have big budgets for security. So what are they spending that on?
Great question. Not on their most significant risks, that's for sure.
Yeah, not the fundamentals,
Well, when you talk about our audience, right, CISOs, our job is two things, right? We consult the business to make good information security risk decisions, and then we implement those risk decisions. So in order for me to do that, if the name of this game is risk management, I have to understand the risk. So risk assessments, good, solid, fundamental risk assessments are critical, right? They're foundational to everything that I'm doing. I also need to have an asset inventory. How can I do a risk assessment if I don't have any understanding of what my assets are? So I think what big organizations are doing is, I think it's a lot of political bullshit. I think it's a lot of everybody else is doing this, so we're going to do this as well. Everybody else is spending on endpoint or XDR or AI driven whatever. So that's where we're going. Yet you've continued to just miss the basic fundamental things. In large organizations, it's really common to have like ghost IT. So you have
Mhm.
parts of the organization where they're running their own IT organization that's separate from this central control. But that's also not an excuse. You just need to account for that, right? So if somebody wants to run their own IT organization within a larger organization, let them do that. We need you to do an information security risk assessment according to this methodology, and then you need to accept those risks. But at least then they're accounted for, as opposed to, I think, in a lot of places, we're just flying blind.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that's so wrong with the industry is we'll take something like this and give it these names like a Salt Typhoon and then nation state and APT and all of this. But if we go through and once you start getting to the root cause of what happened, it's going to be something very foundational that just was overlooked.
It's totally true, man. And I've been asked over the years. I'm sure you've probably been asked too. Like, what's the number one best thing? Give me one tip on how I can protect myself better. And it's the same answer every single time. It's situational awareness. You have to understand your situation. That's the same thing whether you're at home, whether you're out shopping with your wife downtown, whether you're
Hmm.
in an airport, whether you're protecting your home network, an enterprise network. Understanding the situation. So I need to understand myself. I need to understand the systems and the things and the communications and what's going on in my environment. I also need to understand what my threats might be. What's the situation? If I'm a small to mid-sized business that, makes textiles, I'm probably not a target for Salt Typhoon, right? If I understood my situation.
Hmm.
If I'm a large telecommunications company with millions and millions of customer records, including your financial information, including communications, there's been Salt Typhoon, this group, which is Chinese, they've been able to listen in on private communications. So understanding your situation, you should have been paying attention to this shit. The fact that you just allow these things to happen is, I don't know, it's negligent.
Yeah, it shouldn't be excusable or because, we were talking about it before you hit record that it just falls into that same cycle of acceptance. And it ends up being organizations that are getting hit by this are large enough to treat this as the cost of doing business.
And they don't give two shits. And that's the sad thing because, and we've been preaching this, I'm not a boy who cried wolf kind of guy or a doomsdayer by any means, but we haven't suffered. The reason why people aren't really paying attention is because they haven't suffered any pain from this, right? You have these breaches over and over and over again. Nobody's really paying attention because, oh, yeah, it's just another breach, whatever. It's so abstract. We confuse the hell out of, end users. And so nobody's screaming for anybody to change anything. But what we need to do is get out ahead of this before the pain comes. It's going to come. There's a reason why the Chinese spent millions of dollars and 6, 7, when you think about all the planning, they went in probably 10 years of effort to gather all this information. They're going to use it eventually, and then it's going to hurt.
Hmm.
And then everybody's going to scream, oh, what could we have done? You could have done the damn basics is what you could have done. I mean, it all comes down to just this irresponsible use of technology. So for people who don't know who Salt Typhoon is, Salt Typhoon, they've been around for a while. They're Chinese. And they belong to the Chinese MSS, which is the Ministry of State Security. And for people, the thing about the Chinese are master manipulators. No, everything that comes out of China is controlled by the Chinese government. So, and people are like Huawei computers, right? AW. There was kind of a stink about that a couple of years ago about,
Yeah,
well, those chips and everything. And they're like, well, is it potentially going to be used by the Chinese for spying? Yeah, it is.
absolutely.
Everything that comes out of China is every bit of code. There's no private industry in China. And when you talk about situational awareness, it's sad to think that we're using as many Chinese made materials, products, software. They're like, they are our supply chain in a lot of industries and sectors. And you talk to people like, China's our enemy. And people are like, well, no, they're nice people. Okay. That's a complete lack of situational awareness. The Chinese are out to get us. They have been for years. It's a communist government. There's So the fact that Salt Typhoon, it shouldn't be surprising to anybody. Their activities, started in 2020. Initial access, it's the same crap that we've always done. Their initial access, exploiting vulnerabilities. So these are known vulnerabilities. They might be 0 days, they might be novel vulnerabilities, but a vulnerability mostly in software where it's something that's not been patched. It's something that's broken in the software. So some known exploits: Microsoft Exchange, proxy logon. I got a whole bunch of CVEs, Ivanti products, Cisco routers, Ivanti Connect, secure VPNs. I mean, that's what they do. Then they intercept the authentication traffic. So when I've talked about the attack sequence, has always been pretty much the same. It's identify a vulnerability, compromise the vulnerability, elevate your privileges, establish persistence, pivot, and delete logs. That's essentially the same sequence. So your initial access, exploiting vulnerabilities, stealing credentials. There's also web interface exploitations, establishing persistence. That would be through the custom malware that they planted. There's Ghost Spider, Jumbled Path, Demodex, and Masol, as well as another probably 12 or so that haven't been publicly identified. And then they live off the land. That's the pivot part. Right? Living off the land, meaning using tools that are already there on these systems. So you exploit the vulnerability, elevate privileges, try to, with the credential theft, whatever, plant malware, that's establishing your persistence, pivot, looking for, because the system that you originally compromised isn't going to be the system that has all the sensitive data on it. And then your defensive evasion, right? Defensive evasion would be, figure out ways to exfiltrate the data. In most cases, believe it or not, the easiest way to exfiltrate data out of most environments is just FTP. So you have to ask yourself, what environment anywhere ever should require FTP egress?
One thought that was coming to me as you were sharing that, and totally agree with you on everything, but and I'm going back to what you were saying about situational awareness, where everything you were describing is kind of the path of finding a vulnerability and attacking it from there. I believe some of this one, or some of the stuff that was hitting telecoms, was that there was Chinese made hardware in the infrastructure. So it was kind of that Trojan horse. Yeah, well, let's just put you in here behind everything. And to your point about what China's agenda is, they were there. They didn't even have to breach anything. They were actually able to sell the hardware. And say, hey,
add on to that, Dave. Yeah. I'm just sitting here looking at my smartphone and going, hey, how many parts of these are Chinese? So I threw it into Google, and they basically said there's no single answer to how many Chinese parts are in an Android phone, as it varies significantly based on model, brand, etc. However, China's role in manufacturing and sourcing smartphone parts remains substantial, with a significant number of components for most smartphones originating from China. They're probably listening through my smartphone right now.
And the sad thing, there's this, people have this just ignorance where, if you say something like the Chinese are out to get us, they'll be like, oh, that's so bigoted. That's so, whatever. It's like, my God, it's right in front of you. Here you have, this is one, because Salt Typhoon isn't the only one. They've been after infrastructure, for years. And it's not just the United States. China, it's funny, there were some stories that came out about, how China's kind of been aligning themselves with Russia during the Ukraine war and all that stuff, and was supplying, things and whatever. And then the Russians found out that the Chinese were spying on the Russians during this whole time and 5 years prior. Not all that much unlike Salt Typhoon.
Sure.
So China's ultimate goal is world domination, as it is with most geopolitical superpowers. And so it's
like when a cheater gets mad at another person for cheating.
Right. It's like, well, or people will say, well, not all Chinese are bad. The Chinese government is bad.
Right. Not Lucy, the old lady down the street that works on her garden and does yoga on the deck.
No, she's the threat.
Well, and for situational awareness, you have to understand the situation, right? Like the Chinese government is bad, and meaning not compatible with our worldview, right? With the United States. So the Chinese government is bad. The people, not necessarily bad, but if you know the way things work, it's not like in China you vote for your president, right? So it's control, it's complete control. And in China, and if you read the history of China to figure out, some of this stuff, but during the I guess the revolution, the last one,
Mhm.
millions and millions of Chinese were killed. People were killing, families were turning in their family members for being anti-establishment, anti-government. And that's the same thing still applies today. You're not allowed to say negative things about the Chinese government if you're Chinese. It's almost like this brainwash. So then if you have this bad government and you've got people essentially under your control, and you send them out into the world to do what they do. What are you supposed to do with that? There's been story after story after story of Chinese academics working in post-secondary schools as doctorate programs and things like that. That was fine. So how do you handle that stuff? I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah, because you got to realize that, I mean, we started off talking about this, about that one cyber attack. But if you think about Chinese culture, and like you said, this is with all major governments, the type of education that the citizens are receiving from preschool on, and what they're being told, and the perceptions are hardened.
Right. So it's almost like you invite these people. It's almost like you invite Salt Typhoon, here, take our stuff, because you've allowed the infiltration to happen from like multiple angles. And then the basic information security, protections aren't in place. Nobody's watching the front door. And yet you spent, millions and millions of dollars on ineffective information security controls. They may be effective in certain situations, but it certainly wasn't your most significant risk. And it certainly wasn't the one that applied the best in that situation. So go over some of the notable attacks for Salt Typhoon. So 2022 to 2024, U.S. telecommunications campaign. They targeted 9 major U.S. telecom providers, including Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, Lumen Technologies, Spectrum, Consolidated Communications, Windstream, Comcast, and Digital Reality. That's what we know about. They breached core network components such as Cisco routers to access metadata and content on calls and texts, particularly targeting high-profile individuals like President Donald Trump, Vice President J.D. Vance, and Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer. Compromised, quote-unquote, lawful intercept systems. So those lawful intercept systems are things that the NSA set up. It's part of, what was the thing that happened after September 11th, Patriot Act? Where you're allowed this additional surveillance. This is another thing that people don't really pay attention to, is how many civil liberties you've given up since September 11th. I mean, it's nuts. So anyway, these lawful intercept systems are things that have been set up in these telecommunication providers to eavesdrop on communications. So they compromised these systems used for court-authorized wiretapping, court-authorized, wink, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, exposing surveillance data and potentially aiding Chinese targets in evading U.S. monitoring, which is like, of all the systems that you want to monitor, those seem like really important systems to be monitoring.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Right. So and this is 2022 to 2024, they exfiltrated over 1,462 network configuration files from 70 U.S. government and critical infrastructure entities across 12 sectors, including energy, communications, and transportation.
My Lord.
So how helpful is that to a foreign adversary? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're talking like some of the best, juiciest stuff you can get your hands on. 2024, we had go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, you said 12 areas of critical infrastructure, and I think
12 sectors, yeah.
Yeah, and I think
there's only 14.
Okay, yeah, that's a respectable percentage.
And it's like if I was a Chinese national, if I was like the president of China, I'd be like, man, this is goldmine data. This is some of the best of the best. 2024, this was last year, U.S. National Guard breach from March to December 2024. Salt Typhoon compromised a U.S. state Army National Guard network, stealing administrator credentials, network traffic diagrams, geolocation maps, and personally identifiable information of service members. The breach potentially enabled further attacks on other state networks and cybersecurity partners. Absolutely, it does. All these things fit together, right? All these things are additional pivot points into additional other things, right? So the fact that, it's not just that we hit the U.S. National Guard, it's like, what can we use this U.S. National Guard platform to pivot into other things?
Right.
Right.
Yeah, that's like, you made a good point. It's like, now they're sitting on all this, and it's just gonna, like,
Well,
we
they're
we
just
read,
feasting.
yeah, like, what's gonna happen? Like, it's not done yet. Like, now they have this stuff, and now they can.
It's like sitting at a buffet and they just keep bringing you more food than you could possibly ingest.
Right.
Okay, put the rest right over there and I'll get to it in future meals.
And it's also not limited to the United States. Other countries that we know about: South Africa, Thailand, Italy, UK, Argentina, Bangladesh, Indonesia, Malaysia, Mexico. That's where I live. But, Mexicans, they're fine. Netherlands, Thailand, Vietnam, UCLA, California State University, Loyola Marymount, Utah Tech University. So they hit post-secondary schools, likely for their research data. I mean, if China understands the importance and value of data way more than the US does, at least talking
Yeah.
general population. The compromise over 1,000 Cisco devices globally. And a lot of the stuff is like just basics, man, patch management.
It would be interesting to see, like, the next breach that happens. It would be interesting to see kind of like the trail of what past breaches kind of led to these other breaches. Like, oh, this one was accomplished because of the breach on T-Mobile or whatever. And just kind of see the spider web connection. Like, this wouldn't have
I
happened
think,
if this one didn't happen. If this one didn't happen.
well, I think it's like Dave said, it's like a buffet. It's are the points where it's like you get into this and there's a chain of events that happen, but then there are like so many entry points in so many different places that there's like 55,000 different chains of events. And I don't think we'll ever have a true picture of all of this unless we were to go offensive and go after their systems to try to find that. Because I think the way we've done incident response on all of this stuff has been so haphazard. A lot of the incident response is driven by cover your ass as opposed to actually finding the truth of what happened. So I think there's a lot of evidence that's just not there anymore, sadly.
Yeah. And to your point, Jordan, I mean, yeah, if you could unpack just kind of how the dominoes fell. At the same time, it's not a complicated model that China has. They have publicly said, this is what we do, this is how we're going to go about doing it. And then when they see how nations like us and all the other ones you mentioned, Evan, respond to it. I mean, over here within the States, those large companies are just, to them, it's the cost of doing business, and it's a speed bump, and you just keep moving on. But you already knew what China's agenda was, and it's not a complicated business model.
No, and it's like a chess game, and it's like we're playing two different games. Like they're playing chess and we're playing checkers. You know what I mean? They're playing a long-term strategy to ultimately win, whereas we're playing this like quarter to quarter, month to month kind of game. Where it's like, oh, we did great this month, whatever. We put 2 criminals, took down some dark web website. Like, yay for us. But whereas the long-term effect is bullshit. Long-term, when you look at where we're at, in terms of information security, in terms of our risk, in terms of our exposure, in terms of all of that today to where we were 30 years ago, the long-term, we're screwed. And I'm not, like I said, I'm not an alarmist, but it's probably good for people to start learning skills of how to go about your day-to-day business without electronics, without your phone. A lot of people can't do that. A lot of people can't get from point A to point B without, Google Maps, because there's just going to be a time when this data, there's a purpose behind it. And you can hypothesize, you can, try to think, well, what would be the purpose? Why would China want to do all this stuff? Probably not good, I'm guessing. So trying to get out of, in terms of situational awareness, trying to get out ahead of this a little bit. Because the impact, here's 5 things I've got for impact. Number 1, national security. Not just the United States either, by the way, but we'll focus on the United States. The breaches, particularly on U.S. telecom and National Guard networks, they're considered the most significant cyber espionage incidents in U.S. history. Think about that. Like these are the most significant cyber espionage, and I would say any kind of espionage.
Hmm.
You know, I mean, the most significant espionage events in history, compromising sensitive communications and surveillance systems. So, from a national security standpoint, and the only way you can fix that, once data's gone, it's gone. You can't get it back. The only way you can counter, when you're talking about chess, you know, if you're playing a chess game, the only way you can counter that is to make the data that they have no longer valuable, make it invalid. So, you have to change it. So you'd have to change the network configurations and everything else so that the data that they have, and maybe, you know, I would like to think that there are people in the United States government that have a big grasp on this and they're thinking even longer term, because you could have to play even a longer term strategy on this where it's like, all right, we're going to let China have all this data and they're going to think that it's all valid data when they decide to make their plans on how they're going to use it. But we expected them to do that all along. We've already changed it. So then when they execute on that plan, it's not going to work.
Which is probably the strategy we should adopt immediately if we haven't already.
Right. And I don't think that, sadly, I don't think that's how our strategy is right now. So national security, that's a big deal. Data exposure, the group has access metadata and content from millions of users. And I would venture to say every single United States citizen.
And you think with that they can immediately spoof everyone's voice, you know?
I mean, you just like think of like one like attack you could do now with like that doesn't require really a lot of creativity. It take out a whole bunch of loans and open up a whole bunch of accounts, like thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands at all these different banks, and they're all invalid. What does that do to our financial system? You know, what I mean, that there's lots of different ways you could use that data to really fuck things up for people. Critical infrastructure. That one's really frustrating because now you're venturing more into physical safety, not just communications networks, but you know, electricity, water, food,
Yeah, just
healthcare.
just societal structure.
Yep. Economic costs, remediation efforts. If you want, that's the sad thing though, is I think a lot of people will take a short-term remediation approach to this. You can't shortcut the remediation. So the costs economically, whether they're now or they're later, and really all you're doing is just kicking the can down the road. Eventually you're going to have to take your damn medicine. If you want to get better, then it's going to cost a lot of money, and it's not going to cost money in like buying more MDR solutions or more setting up more security operations centers or bullshit like that. It's like time costs. It's the non-sexy part of security costs. Like this is how you configure a firewall correctly, for crying out fucking loud.
So do you think
That pisses me off because I've always been I've been a network guy all my life, and I cannot imagine installing a firewall without doing it right.
Sure.
how much blame would you put on like the CISO of these organizations?
Well, I think there's a lot of CISOs who just were never taught better. They don't know any better. I think there are some CISOs who are just full of themselves and think that they are good at shit. And won't admit that that they're not good at shit. But there's a reason, I think, why there's such a rampant amount of imposter syndrome in our industry. I think there are a lot of CISOs who are in those positions that aren't qualified to be in those positions, and they know it.
Yeah, I think that, laws and stuff like that would probably answer differently. But I think really the root metric is what is the situational awareness that CISO had of the organization and its environment, and how did they communicate that to leadership?
When you've also got lots of CISOs that are just CISOs by title, you know what I mean? They haven't been empowered. They haven't been enabled. I think more so than the CISOs, I think it's just an accountability problem that's rampant throughout the entire industry. You know, accountability for tech and creating the shit tech that you create, that causes people harm. I think it's people in our industry. I wrote an article yesterday about, vendors in our industry selling products to people. Either they're false promises, they don't work, they don't do what you say they're going to do. You're selling it to somebody who obviously doesn't know how to use it correctly, or it's just not a fit, right? I mean, you sell something super sophisticated to a small to mid-sized business, They feel great because they got this awesome thing that they don't know how to use, but they just pissed away a whole bunch of money. So would you rather not spend an information security dollar or misspend an information security dollar? I would much rather not spend, because if I misspend an information security dollar, I've got a false sense of security to go along with the fact that I just pissed away money. A false sense of security is a lack of situational awareness.
Yeah.
So you shot yourself in the foot, from a couple different angles.
And
Go ahead, man. Sorry.
no, I was just going to say, and if you don't spend it, but you attain some better situational awareness, you still have it available to spend.
Right.
I think this is interesting. It made me kind of wonder, like, of these telecom companies, how long the CISO had been there. ChatGPT didn't give me exactly what I wanted, but it did bring back, like, on average, a CISO's tenure is like 1.5 to 2 years. In general industries, it said Fortune 500 companies is about 3.5, large enterprises 3.25 years. It's a short amount of time to, if that's true. And I don't know, like, these telecoms or some of these people that got hit by Salt Typhoon, but it'd be interesting to kind of understand from a CISO perspective, how long had they been there? What kind of changes did they try to implement immediately? Like, we talk about this day one when you're a vCISO. What are you doing to try to fix this broken organization, assuming that they are broken, and then you need to get to the basics?
Well, that's also why we teach in the CvCISO program. There's one whole class that's about leaving the system, preparing an information security program that can be handed off to somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
Because my job as your CISO or vCISO is not to have you as a customer forever. That's on the list of priorities. It's not even on my list. What I want to do is set you up for success. I know that I'm not going to be here forever. So what are you going to do when I'm gone? So I think good CISOs can set up structure, process that lives on after your tenure within the organization. But I would guess most CISOs, most CISOs probably don't give a shit about that. Where it's because I think that's a selfless thing. And that's one of the things in our industry that is so frustrating too, is like, this is a service industry. This is a service. It's not a product industry. I use products to serve, but service always comes first. So when I'm working as a CISO, when you're working as a vCISO, you need to do what's best for the organization, even if it comes counter to what's best for you personally, right?
Yeah.
It's my job.
I was just going to say, Jordan, if you can go in, communicate, because this is often what I would tell a client is that the definition of success in what I do is in working myself out of a job.
There's lots of opportunity. I mean, seriously, that's one of the things I get frustrated about. A lot of frustrations, obviously, today. But, you have two information security consulting companies, let's say, and they view each other as competitors. Oh, you work for FR Secure. You guys are competitors. Rather than us being competitors, why don't we be collaborators? Rather than us fighting over the 5 to 10% of organizations that might be doing information security correctly, why don't we work together and go get the 90% that aren't?
Yeah. Let's think about our communities.
But I think the reason why people feel like that is I think it's people know that they're not. If you sucked at your job, you'd be less likely to invite other people to come suck with you because they'll find out that you suck. But if you're really good at your job and you're in this game for the right reasons, you go out and try to get other people to come join you in this, because I don't feel like I haven't been impostoring syndroming anybody. You know what I mean? It's like we need to collaborate and fix this together. We'll all make plenty of money.
Well, and that's the thing that, like, what prevents people from cooperating rather than or over competition. It's money. It's not truly having that mission before money mentality, and that's unfortunate, because I feel like of all the businesses that exist, this has real stuff to unify around. I mean, we're talking about nation state people that are our enemies going after us. Like, this affects everyone, and we ought to come together, join hands, and fight back against this stuff. Everyone should be adopting. When it comes to information security, everyone should be adopting the mission before money.
Just think where we would be if more people adhered to.
Well, and the truth is, if money is your motivator, you can make more money putting mission first. And I always said, like, mission. If you serve the mission, you'll make plenty of money. If you serve the money, you won't make the mission. So it's a priorities thing. I think that's one of the reasons why people don't collaborate more and work openly more together. I think another reason is somebody might find out that I actually suck at this. So as opposed to, I think being honest, look, I suck at this. Help me unsuck, and then we can go work on this mission together.
And that's a challenge to others on the opposite side is stop making people that are new feel like they suck. Like let's help people along. Let's mentor them and let's get better together.
That's a good point too. I think it can be intimidating sometimes. I think about that myself. I think sometimes I get so passionate where I'm preaching and then I'm like, man, I probably came off like really intimidating right there.
There's a lot of and you're on the lower side of this in my opinion, Evan. I don't, but there are lots of information security groups that I find myself a part of. There is a lot of like trash talking, like, there's a breach and it's a lot of, oh, what an idiot. And just pointing out how stupid people are. And sometimes it's maybe legit. Sometimes people earn that that was stupid. But man, I sometimes I just get so sick of it. I'm just like, guys, like, okay, yeah, they messed up, man. Like let's do a better job of educating. Let's hold hands and fix things instead of kicking people while they're down.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of posturing in this industry. And I think posturing is just another tell on insecurity, right? I mean, if you're good at your shit and you're good at your shit, why do you have to posture about it?
Yeah. Or feel threatened that you're helping uplift others.
Yeah. Just keep going, keep doing your shit if it's so good. That's cool. So the last impact for, Salt Typhoon, and I mentioned this a little bit already, the activities align with China's long-term strategy. They have a long-term strategy. They call it the 100-year strategy. The United States doesn't have a 100-year strategy. The United States, just to contrast the way we think differently, CISA came out in 2018, I think was the first year we created CISA, America's cybersecurity agency, right? They didn't have a strategy until last year, or maybe the year before. It didn't even exist. There was no strategy, short term, long term, or anything. So that's all problems. Now, our actions in April 2025, the FBI announced a $10 million bounty for information on Salt Typhoon hackers or actors. You have to think, okay, what's that going to do? Like a $10 million bounty for information on Salt Typhoon actors. Are you actually going to be able to get them out of China and prosecute them? And which one of the Salt Typhoon attack actors would you be looking for? And how would you know? It's just like, that to me was just like a PR stunt.
Yeah, it's like putting a Band-Aid,
In January 2025, the U.S. Treasury sanctioned Sichuan Chuxin, some network technology company, and Yin Keqiang for their involvement in Salt Typhoon operations. I'm not sure what the sanction would do. The FCC proposed new cybersecurity regulations for telecoms, including mandatory risk management plans and annual compliance certifications. God. So mandatory risk management plans. Well, there you go. Wasn't that the name of the game from like day one?
Right.
And what must that management plan look like? I don't know. The other thing, the annual compliance certifications don't work in information security. They just don't work. I'm not talking about CISSP or CvCISO, those types of certifications. I'm talking about compliance certifications because it leads to this checkbox mentality where people are going to do the least amount possible for the cheapest amount possible to achieve the certification. And once they achieve the certification, they're going to look the other way. Okay, we're done. Let's go celebrate and go do something else. That's why they don't work. You've got to create information security like it's a life skill. This is how we do business. So I'm not happy about the certification piece. CISA, NSA, FBI, and international partners issued guidelines for communications service providers, emphasizing anomaly detection, reduced internet exposure, and network segmentation. My God, people.
Yeah, you're just getting back to the basics.
Man, how many dollars do these people get paid to be like, well, thank God we have these new issued guidelines to tell us how to do network segmentation.
Right.
I learned network segmentation as part of my CCNA back in 1992. My Lord. All right, defensive strategies. So what does this mean for me as a vCISO? I think as a vCISO, what this means is you need to be prepared to answer the questions. So chances are really good that in your small to mid-sized business, if that's where you're working as a VC, so you're probably not going to be targeted by Salt Typhoon unless it's part of your supply chain, unless you work in one of these sectors and you're very impactful in that sector or something like that. But that would still come down to your own situational awareness. You need to take a step back and look at that picture. What's more likely is, somebody, an executive, the board, somebody, a peer read about, Salt Typhoon and some of the recent news and wants your opinion about it. So be prepared to get that answer. Do a little bit of research on Salt Typhoon beyond just what you heard. Other things, if you are potentially, go ahead, man.
No, I was just gonna kind of piggyback on what you were saying is have that understand what this is, have that situational awareness and be able to communicate that to how it impacts your organization or the organization that you're serving.
Right. Yep. And then hit on these defensive strategies, so if executives, because we're always looking for opportunities to demonstrate our value as a VCSO to the organization. This is beyond just a cost center, right? If a business is in business to make money, how do I enable it to make more money or keep more of their money? On the one side, when somebody asks you, now the other thing that you can learn from the defensive strategies, number one, patch management, right? So the time that you've been spending, let's say that you've been doing a pretty good job as a VCSO with the organization, and you have a patch management strategy that you implemented, and it took some time, it took some work, it took some effort. Sell that, right? So executive management, here's one of the defensive strategies, patch management. Remember last year when we spent all that time working on patch management and implementing that program? That protects us from this, right? And it gives them that sense of like, oh, okay, so that money we just spent wasn't just pissing away money. It actually has an application. And you're such a good VCSO that you got us out ahead of this, right? They want that sense of safety. So defensive strategy number one, patch management. You can't have patch management without asset management, by the way. So, asset management comes first. Number two, network segmentation. Now, in a lot of small to mid-sized businesses, you may have just one flat network. You may have just a few network segments. But there's segmentation and then there's isolation. Those are two different things that you can do on your network. Segmentation really is just layer 2, layer 3, putting in VLANs. That's segmentation. Isolation is putting some kind of traffic filtering between those VLANs, right? Like a firewall, some access control list, something like that. So look at your network diagrams, how your network's been architected. If it is one single flat network and you've got super sensitive systems commingled with dumb systems, that's a good opportunity for you to segment those things. There's lots of different strategies, but that's a basic, that's a fundamental. You shouldn't be installing a network unless you know how to install a network. And if you don't know how to install a network, learn. Incredibly difficult. You know what I mean? It's basic stuff, how networks work. And the reason why it's so fundamental is that's all the communications. Computers only talk to each other over a network, whether it's a wired network, whether it's a wireless network. So if my computer, if you can hack the crap out of my computer, if my computer can't talk to anything else, well, then who cares? So segmentation is like super important. Credential security. Nobody likes passwords. I hate passwords as much as anything else, but things like giving people, how do you create a strong password? It's not about complexity. It's about length. Strong is long. Long is strong. Sorry. Synonymous, I guess. Long is strong with passwords. So like I'll just give you an example. Like I might use a password and you're going to get people that would argue with this, but maybe I use each one of my kids' names, or I just take like the youngest daughter, her name is Lydia. Maybe my password is Lydia Francine is the most beautiful 20-year-old I know, or is a very beautiful 20. That's a very long password. That's hard to crack down, right? That's the thing with multi-factor authentication. It should be illegal, in my opinion, that you have that you have something to authenticate with on the internet that isn't secured with multi-factor authentication. That is, you're just asking for like, hey, please hack the crap out of me. This is your 2025, man. I mean, that's the way in. We talk about, that first step is to identify a vulnerability, then compromise that vulnerability. The easiest one is just ask somebody for their password, send them a phishing email. I mean, it takes 20 seconds for me to do that. And it's hard. The thing about credentials too, is if I'm in your environment with your credentials, it doesn't look unusual, right? Because I didn't have to break anything. Like I just looked like I looked like you logged in. just to the system. It was you that logged in. So credential security, patch management, network segmentation, credential security, monitoring, monitor your networks, right? We know that we can't prevent all bad things from happening. So the things that we can't prevent from happening, we need to be able to detect it. Once you detect it, then you can respond to it. That's trifecta, I guess. So try to prevent, detect, respond. Simple. And then there's other things, but take network segmentation, for instance. This is like, I'm a firewall guy. Firewalls are not meant to be just ingress blocking, meaning ingress means from a network that's less to a network that's more trusted, right? So like the internet to my internal network, that's ingress traffic. That's only one part of a firewall. That's actually the easiest part of setting up a firewall. The other, as important, if not more important, is egress filtering. That's from the more trusted network out to the less trusted networks. That'd be like from my home network out to the internet. That's super critical. And the reason why it's super critical on attacks like this is because when I establish persistence as an attacker, there's a beacon, there's a callback. And so some system, wherever I establish my persistence on whatever system inside that network, as a callback to a command and control system, right? That's how the attacker gets back in, right? If you block that with the egress filtering on the firewall, there's no command and control. They can't do anything. They can plant the malware, but they can't communicate back with it. So, I think you'd stop 90% of attacks like this if you use multi-factor authentication and did egress filtering properly on your firewalls.
Well, just think how much egress control ties back to situational awareness.
Right. Yeah, it's just like that. We just, so many of us in information security just fight this game blind. You don't have any asset inventory, so you don't really know what it is you're trying to protect. You talk about zero trust. Well, you can't implement zero trust without knowing what you're trying to protect. So you'd have to have an asset inventory. It'd have to be a detailed asset inventory. You'd have to have communication flows ironed out, which would mean egress filtering on your firewall. So if you want, not only is it the most effective way to protect against most attacks that originate from the internet, multi-factor authentication and egress traffic filtering on your firewall, but it also is great, probably the most impactful first step that you could take in getting zero trust implemented in your network if you're bought in on that methodology. So it's Salt Typhoon. There's so much to learn. And that's why, I read about these things, not because I'm going to go out and stop Salt Typhoon, but I know I'm going to stop Salt Typhoon on my own shit, but it's part of my own situational awareness, right? How does this stuff work? And being that I'm getting paid, that's the thing. Because you heard a lot of people say, well, I don't understand any of that. Well, then learn it. You get paid for this. I get paid a lot of money to know these things, so I should stay up on these things. I should read about it. I think, we should all do that.
Yeah. And be in circles where you can collaborate with others, share what you know and learn what they know.
Yeah. Yeah. Because Salt Typhoon is not something it's impressive just in its scale, but you have a lot of incident responders too that have never run into state-sponsored stuff before. And, initially it's like you get intimidated by it. Ain't nothing to be intimidated by because, like I said, it's the same TCP IP that you and I use. It's the same, whatever they compromised, it's the same firmware. It's the same, coding languages that we all use. There's nothing, they didn't create some pixie dust thing to attack you. They used stuff that anybody can use.
Yeah. They were just found a highly scalable way to apply it.
Yeah. Lots of Chinese people sitting in an office.
Fist bumping each other over how we're
Good job. You got AT&T again. Yeah, sweet. Have they blocked your command? Have they blocked your command? Have they blocked your command and control yet? Nope. How long's it been? 4 years. Great.
And that's them effectively monitoring for better situational awareness.
All right. So I hope this helped you guys. Thanks for letting me preach, man, because this stuff really does get under my skin.
No, I think this is fantastic. And I think it's got some good insights of really what we're trying to share with people through the podcast.
All right. That's it. What else you got for us, Larry?
Thank you for listening.
All right. See you next week.
Look forward. Awesome. Thank you.